Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Rosemary Carminati. Rosemary Carminati is a personal development trainer, international speaker, and retirement specialist. Following a 30-year career in corporate sales, she is now dedicated to helping her clients transition through career changes or retirement with reignited purpose and vitality. She facilitates several proven and sustainable personal, professional development programs and masterminds. Her story is a testament to the transformative power of pursuing one's passions, prioritizing well-being, and planning for a fulfilling life. And with that, Rosemary, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite some time now.
Thank you, Dave. It's so great to be here. And I've been looking forward to it too, since we were on that panel together.
That's right. I think we were at an Envision Leadership Series panel facilitated by Keith McNally. I think it was you, me, Alethea Felton. These are all individuals that I have become very fond of. And I'm glad we've had the opportunity today to have you on the podcast and talk about what you do primarily as a retirement specialist and wherever else the conversation is going to go.
Sounds great.
My first question for you, Rosemary, is please tell our listeners about the experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions today.
Deep and involved question that I will make as succinct as possible. One of the things I do with my clients when we start talking about retirement planning is I have them do a biography of their life. I certainly wouldn't have done that with clients until I had done it myself. And this happened several years ago that I started doing that. And that's where I started seeing the path. And if any of your viewers have done something similar to this, you'll see that even in childhood, we had some predisposition to certain things in our lives. And you look back later on and say, oh, now that makes sense. I always seem to do this or that. Well, part of what I've always done as being a leader just is innately a part of me, being the voice for the people that don't have the need or not have the ability or the strength. And I think a lot of that comes from, as a child, I had an older sister, 4 years older than me, who at the time she was 12, I was 8, she began to get sick. And for decades, she was 12 to 64, battled 3 different cancers, written in medical journals for some of the treatments, nitrogen, mustard, and absolutely crazy things that they were doing back in the 60s and 70s. And the perception I had on life that I adapted early on was that life was a gift and that there was no time for huge wallowing in pity and what don't I have and scarcity. I developed this zest, this need for finding out, discovering new things, and not taking any time to, I want to say, what often people do is count the things they don't have instead of the things they have. So I developed this sense of gratitude that I didn't realize I had, and this sense of get over it, life is great, keep moving. And that sustained me my whole life. In my 20s, what that brought me to was a career in sales. Now, I did not plan it. As usual, the universe sends these things to you. I just said, let me try it. Well, 35 years later, very successful through many different iterations in media, print. I even sold liquor and fine wines and food, you name it. I ran the gamut of different sales industries that I worked in, all succeeding, enjoying it to an extent. But what I discovered in my 50s was it was taking a toll on me, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And at the same time, all of that was hitting the fan. I started going through a family crisis. And this was a crisis with a family member that lasted over a decade. In this crisis, I began slowly and then eventually losing myself. I often referred to myself, whether I said it out loud or not, I thought, I'm a living corpse. I take in air. I serve no purpose. I'm just here existing. I had lost faith in human beings. I had lost faith in the system that's supposed to protect us. I lost faith in my higher power. I lost faith in family members, but most of all, I lost faith in myself. And this happened about 9 years ago, where I had an epiphany, a moment where I decided, wait a minute, I do have value. Even if no one else recognizes it right now, I matter. I believe in myself. Somehow I have to get out of this. And so I started on this journey of self-discovery, reinventing myself, but also finding my old self and becoming a better version, a stronger version, a more peaceful, a more hopeful, joyous person once again. And in that process, I also decided that, corporate world wasn't going to fit into my puzzle anymore. Part of what made it difficult to be in corporate world was the fact that there was no time to rest on your laurels. You always had the next goal to achieve, and no one was celebrating today. It was constant. Okay, you did that. Now what are you going to do? That was 10 minutes ago. And in sales, that's a great tendency to never really celebrate and appreciate the moment. And I said to myself, I cannot live like that anymore. The money, it just is not the most important thing in my life. And so that self-discovery and new challenges, because obviously financially, it's a whole different thing. And the circle of friends and just about everything changed. But what I discovered was I found a whole new meaning for my life. And in helping other people was helping me. And I know there's a lot of listeners out there that have gone through crises and grief and transitions. And one of the best ways that help them get through that transition is in service to others. And so that's where I started doing what I do now, and starting with general population, helping them through transitions. And gradually, the people that needed me most found me. And those were the people that were 40s, 50s, and up, that had identity crises, that had thought retirement was going to be one thing, and they found out it was something totally different. And their expectations were not met with reality. Reality was something that just hit them in the face, and they said, no one told me. No one told me to expect this, that, and that. And I know we're going to be talking more about that. So that's what led me to where I am today. This need to serve, to allow people to fulfill their lifelong dreams at any age. Because I always say, you're never too, it's not my saying, but I repeat it. You're never too old to have a happy childhood, and you're never too old to fulfill your dreams.
No, as long as we're sitting up, taking oxygen and nourishment, the dream is still going to be a dream unless we choose to abandon that dream or the dream is fulfilled. And I'm paraphrasing one of my favorite musicians and philosophers, Neil Peart from Rush, who said something to that extent. And I think it's very true. I mean, you're not too old to achieve a new status in life. You're not too old to achieve your dreams. You just keep moving. Age is relative when it comes to the fulfillment of our life goals.
Mm-hmm. And you said a key point. It's a choice we make. Because too many people go through life listening to other people's advice.
Yep.
And doing things that other people tell them they should do. The older we get, the less we're concerned about what other people think of us.
Yeah. I think because we've seen everything, we've also tested and tried to please everybody that we could just from our choices to try to make others around us happy. But in reality, we can't make everybody around us happy, and it becomes an exercise in futility.
Mhm.
So I think we learn as we get older to see the world through our own eyes, make decisions that are going to be consistent with our value system. And if people align with that, great. If they don't, they can exercise free will to align to a path that aligns with their values,
Right.
without trying to tell us, well, you have to do it this way. And there's no such thing as have tos or should. It's a choice. That's why
Mhm.
we have free will.
Yes, definitely. And the thing is, the choice goes to so many different things because I often tell people, and I know most of you have heard this, that the stress that we have in our life is quite often self-imposed.
Mhm.
Stress is actually our expectations not meeting our reality.
Mm.
So if we choose to change, there are things that we can change. We can change our thoughts, our emotions, our energy, our intentions, and we can also change the people that we spend our time with. And that's a whole nother thing that
Yeah.
happens in retirement too.
Well, and I think if we can gradually embrace that metamorphosis before we retire,
Yes.
I think we're going to be more prepared for retirement. And I know people that I've talked with just said, wow, I wasn't expecting retirement to be this boring. But I mean, retirement is a chapter of your life that you have to plan out. We spend more time at work when we're working full time than we do it probably at home.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
what new hobbies do we want to pursue in retirement? How do we want to utilize our time? Do we want to balance it between service, focusing on hobbies, maybe doing another part-time venture, writing, anything? And it's basically it requires some mindfulness and thought, uh, in order for that to happen. And I think a lot of people just think, well, you retire, things are going to fall into place. Well, they're not going to
Mhm.
fall into place until you're proactive enough to have a plan to say, this is how I think my retirement, that stage of my life needs to look. Had I had not done that, I probably would have just withered away and just blown away in the wind.
I call it rudderless. You're
Yep.
floundering. And you hit the nail on the head. There are certain transitions in our lives that are inevitable.
Mhm.
One of them is slowing down in your work, whether it be full retirement, part retirement, whatever it is. At some point, you are not going to be as productive as you were in your 20s and 30s. And so
Mhm.
that's something you have to plan for. And these folks that I know that have children that have that empty nest syndrome, I laugh. I say, okay, so when they were born, you didn't think they would ever grow up and move out of the house? I mean, that's a transition that most people should start thinking about. And yet I have many, especially female friends, that carried mother as their identity so deeply that they were challenged beyond belief in who they were, what they wanted to do, their purpose when their children got older and moved out.
Yep.
And yet, if they thought about it, planning for retirement can help in so many different ways. And, to me, one of the biggest ways is not only easing some of the stress, but enjoying some of the transition. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could actually enjoy the whole process because you know to expect certain things? And I think sometimes what we do in our culture, especially in the United States, is we glorify. We put up that big, I like to say, like a neon sign saying, this is what you're working for. Shangri-La, come here, retirement. It's the most beautiful, peaceful, wonderful thing. And you don't have a care in the world. And there are people I know, and I'm sure your viewers have seen and witnessed people that spend their lives waiting for when they're going to be happy when they retire. I hear it often. When I retire, I can't wait till I retire. And they plan for the logistics.
Mhm.
They plan for where they're going to live, how they're going to pay their bills. They've done their 401k. They've planned since they were in their 30s or 20s financially. I know many young people that are smart enough to know that, and they're doing all of that, but they're not looking at the psychological needs that we all have that are going to be addressed once retirement hits. I have someone in my life that I know for a fact that going through retirement has been a challenge because part of what he did was an authority figure that gave him significance. He felt worthy and valuable.
Mhm.
And now, no title, no parking spot, no name above the door, and no one is there asking his opinion on anything. So his self-value and worth has diminished tremendously. Planning
Yeah.
ahead of time could have handled that differently.
And knowing that once we retire, we're not going to become as relevant in the workplace as we once were. That's the time to say, okay, what are some additional hobbies I can cultivate while I'm working? What are some additional interests that I can develop? Do I want to, what have I always wanted to do that I haven't done? Like either writing or, writing a screenplay. And I mean, it could be anything. You can dream, but it's getting out of what you normally do and expanding. And I think with retirement is another opportunity for growth. It isn't just an opportunity, it isn't just to stagnate and say,
No.
I'm going to sit home. And we can grow into different directions again if we so choose. And I think if we become proactive in planning for it. Like in my own situation, I worked as an addictions counselor for 27 years, but at the same time, I started teaching part-time at Utica University. And so when I retired from the state, I had teaching to go into. And then eventually I started doing some writing. I found out that I was busier in retirement than I ever was working.
So you're not my ideal client.
No, you would lose money on me, Rosemary.
Exactly. And the people that I surround myself in my social circle and the people that I love to spend most of my time with are not my ideal clients either. A lot of people are sleepwalking through life. There
Mhm.
are people that do the 9 to 5 only to get to the weekend to enjoy their real life. How many people we know that do that don't have fulfillment in their jobs right now, or do have some fulfillment, but they're just waiting to be happy when? And when you said find a hobby, there are a lot of people that I deal with that when I ask them, what are your dreams and goals? They'll say, I don't know if I have any dreams. So we have to start from really scratch from very beginning of what makes you tick. I often say part of what I do is dissecting their psychology and then rebuilding it, because there are too many people that really are lost, and they're lost in life. So you can imagine when they don't have the foundation of their work to keep them stable, now they're really living without purpose. You age rapidly. The statistics I love to share, and it's from a gentleman that works with Blue Zones. And I'll paraphrase. The 2 most dangerous years in your life are the year you're born because of infant mortality rates and the year you retire. And to switch that and live with purpose instead adds 7 or more years to your longevity and quality years, not just
Mhm.
years of going through the motions. I have a friend that retired 2 years ago, and he laughs it off, but it is a sad state when someone says, the way I know what day it is that I look at the calendar on the back of the bathroom door. And the research shows that retirees, it's well over 40 hours worth of TV a week. These are not productive. Everybody needs to relax, but without purpose, without feeling that there's a reason for you to get out of bed every day. You said it, boredom, loneliness, anger. I worked my whole life. This is all I have to show for it. There are so many emotions that people aren't prepared for. And I love to catch people before retirement and say, let's look at how you're going to plan. And the first thing to start with is, what do you love about what you're doing?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, when you were talking earlier in the podcast about your work in sales, it's a push-pull kind of a business. You don't rest on your laurels. You could close $1 million deal. They're going to ask, what are you going to do for me now? You're kind of like that hamster in the wheel, not for your own self-fulfillment, but to fulfill an organizational mission that you may not even truly identify with, but you need to align with that so that you can make a living and take care of your family and take care of yourself. I think the best organizations are those organizations that sit down with their employees and say, how do you see your work here? What are your strengths? What are your skills? How can we
Mhm.
maximize those? Where they become invested in the organizational mission rather than just be a witness to a mission that they may not even align to, but they need to just for survival and sustenance purposes. And I think when you take that away, and I think for people I've talked to who've struggled with retirement, it's like, well, what do I do now? What's my purpose? What kind of
Yeah.
a world do I want to create for myself? Because my energy has been so focused on meeting the demands of an employer's whose mission I don't necessarily agree with, but that I needed to meet so that I could survive and take care of my family. Push comes to shove, you take that away, it's like you lose yourself in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And in preparing for retirement or semi-retirement or whatever you want it to look like, this first simple step, very, very simple, before we get into values and psychological needs and so on, is to just look at your job, what you do for a living. If you're blessed to do something that you actually enjoy, I mean, there's parts of every position that we hold that we might not like, but the things that we love about what we do, write down all the things you love about what you do, whether it be your coworkers, whether it be the certainty of knowing exactly what you need to do every day, or maybe the uncertainty of it. Or you write down everything you love about what you're currently doing, and then you start exploring, how am I going to fill these voids? That's the simplest way to start. Once you get to that point and you say to yourself, okay, I think I can do this, that, or the other to fill in those voids, but I've got so many other things that I can't figure out how I'm going to fulfill myself once I lose that, like the social aspect. Or that's when they work with someone like me, a clergy member, a very good friend, whatever it be, working with someone else to sit down and say, what makes me tick? When I was talking about the psychological needs, they're basic and they've been around for generations that therapists and trainers such as myself, my mentors, have been talking about. And they are the need for certainty, uncertainty, significance, love, growth, and contribution. Well, once we start looking at those and we say, for me, certainty is not a big one. For me, significance is not a big one. I love to do for other people anonymously. I don't need to have a big parade after I get something accomplished. Some people, it's the opposite.
Mhm.
I like uncertainty. I am not a cubicle person. I can't sit in this room all day. I have to go meet people and have adventures every day. So if that's part of your job you love right now, those are the things you have to look at. What are those psychological needs that drive you and motivate you and keep you interested in growth and learning? And quite often, that's something just people don't even talk about before retirement. It's the basic needs, and they think physical needs. They don't think of those are the life sustaining. That's the breath that keeps us going. I mean,
Mhm.
if and for me, growth and contribution are huge. And I also believe that for everybody on the planet, whether they want to admit it or not, the need for love is a basic psychological need, whether they want to admit it or not. I often say it's like Ebenezer Scrooge. Yeah, I don't need anybody. I hate people. No, we all need some sort of unconditional love. And that starts with us. And
Mhm.
that's what we talk about when we plan for retirement, too. Let's find that inner happiness first before we even deal with the outer happiness. Because on a surface, yes, get a hobby, do this, do that. Yeah, they fulfill your outer needs. But if you haven't figured out inwardly what is going to bring me peace, joy, a feeling of gratitude, love, abundance, and so on, all of the surface things will work, but probably not permanently. And there's going to be regrets at the end of your life. And those regrets are deep and very sad when you think of the regrets of, I didn't allow myself to enjoy happiness when I had it. That's one of the top regrets for people before they
Mhm.
die. The other one, I didn't live authentically.
Mhm.
So when I work with people that are preparing for retirement or already in retirement and suffering some of those things, I talk to them about their identity. Let's pull things apart and figure out, what are your values now?
Mhm.
Maybe you weren't living your values for the last 30 years. You can't go back, but let's start from this moment on and reassess, renew, reinvigorate, sometimes reinvent. All those words.
Well, and it sounds like one, you have some very distinct actionable steps that you take to help individuals prepare for retirement. But the other thing, it sounds to me, is if you also are helping them rewrite their narrative for that chapter of life in
Mhm.
terms of determining what their new interests are, what they value, what they prioritize. And I think what that does is it sends a very clear message that you are loved, your opinion, your thoughts are important to me, and that I'm going to work with you in this next stage. Because the other part of retirement is that, getting older is a privilege, but you also are experiencing more losses. Your
Mhm.
support system becomes more fragmented. Family members become more distant geographically and just because they have their own lives going on. So to be able to communicate to somebody that their values are truly important, their opinions are truly important, tells them that they still have some worth in the world. And I think it's important. It sounds like that's what you do very well with clients who request your services.
Well, it's extremely important. And again, I'll speak to our culture in the United States, and I'm sure you have global listeners, and I have global clients. And
Mhm.
not all countries are like the United States, but here in our country, we are a country of, let's put it this way, as you age, your value diminishes.
Yep.
And there's a certain point where they discover you're really not worth anything anymore. So maybe you should just stay over in the corner and we'll bring the new people in. And instead, it should be the opposite. We
Mm.
have so much to offer, to
Yeah.
contribute with our brains, our experiences, our consciousness, you name it. And when I work with clients, it starts with loving yourself and me helping them find that love for themselves before they can actually discover it. And it's
Mhm.
also finding their faith. As I said, when I lost my faith, the big part was spirituality, but it also was faith in myself. They need to discover what are their gifts, their strengths, those things we're born with. We're put on this earth with unique abilities, unique contributions to other people that sometimes we haven't discovered or we've let other people cover up, that whole dimming our light. And that happens as we get older too,
Mm.
where we want to speak our voice and we're told,
Yeah.
you need to be quiet. Well, there's a lot of us that have very strong, powerful messages that we want to share.
Well, we also have very powerful stories that can help the younger generations and the
Hmm.
present generation because, we've lived, in my case, I'll be 70 next year. So I've lived 7 decades. So I can, if anybody, if a young adult came up to me and said, tell me the story of your life, I can give them 7 decades worth of information. And, you look at other cultures and Native American culture, the grandparents are responsible, I believe, for passing down the traditions
Hmm.
to the younger members of their family and those tribal nations. And elders are revered. The elders are revered in that culture. I don't know in Asian culture, elders are
Yep.
revered, but in the United States, it's like, oh, once you reach a certain age, you've lost your ability to make a difference. And, but I think ageism kind of works both ways. I think a lot of times individuals will say, well, you're too young to make a difference and you're too
Right.
old to make a
Oh, yeah,
difference. But age is relative. You're never too young to make a difference. You're never too old to make a difference.
exactly. And you're never too young to start planning for retirement. That's another thing I say.
That's right.
But what you said about ageism too, important thought that just came in and almost flew out like a bird. Hold on a second. I love when that happens. Um, it'll come back to me. It was a great thought. The idea that oh, giving hope. Okay. Part of my identity statement is I say I'm a distributor of hope. What happens to the clients that come to me? Sometimes it's because of a family member that says, please, please, please help him because I don't know what else we can do. And I'll just have a discussion to see if they're open and ready. Quite often, what happens in our society as we age, we're allowed to accept limitations. We're allowed to say that ageism, people use it as an excuse too. I hear coworkers that are younger than me that say, well, when you get as old as I am, I'm like, wait a minute, you're 50 and you're already giving that speech? And you're already talking about what a lot of people do in retirement. They talk about the things they can no longer do and how their body is not functioning the way it should, and so on and so on. Instead of flipping it, what are the things I still can do? What are the new adventures with whatever limitations I have physically? Okay, so I used to be a gymnast. I can't do that anymore. I'm not going to attempt to do it, but I love the fact that I did do it and I don't look back with regrets. I say to myself, I'm so glad that you had the courage to do this, that, the other. I was a singer in a band in the 80s, and I look at old videos of myself, great outfits, singing my belting the tunes. I don't think, oh, gee, I wish I could still look like that and do that. No, I still sing and I'll do it in different ways. What I do with the people I work with is say, instead of looking at what you can't do anymore, let's figure out those gifts, those strengths, and put them to use in a different way and accept it. The part that drives me crazy is the amount of time people are struggling to accept the inevitable. Aging is inevitable. We have the wrinkles. We have the lack of flexibility, maybe a little bit of creaks when we get out of bed, all those things that happen. And we can try our darndest to stay healthy and keep it up as much as possible, but we are still going to age.
Yep.
Accept it gracefully, but find out what is within your power to live. And I know you and I have talked about it before, intentionally.
Yep.
Living
And
intentionally is extremely important to me.
how do you transcend living intentionally into helping people prepare for retirement?
Well, when I say living intentionally, let's look at the opposite. And as I stated earlier, the people that are not living intentionally, that are allowing life to guide them, they just get up every day and they go through the motions. And the biggest one is waiting for happiness. I will be happy when I get the promotion. I will be happy when I get married. I will be happy when I have a child, when I lose weight. The list goes on. And part of intentional living is learning how to be happy now in whatever circumstances you're in. And I've been in some pretty terrible situations in my life. Maybe at that very second, I couldn't find gratitude, but I have worked through a lot of that trauma to find gratitude in the challenges I've had in my life, so that every day I do live intentionally. I'll tell you a quick story. The sister that I had that I told you was ill her whole life, and she was my hero. The woman never complained. I mean, she complained sometimes to me privately, but she generally made the best out of every day with chronic pain. I mean, there was a person that could have hated life and anybody that was healthy. She could have hated my other sister and myself because we were healthy and vibrant, and she was always in and out of the hospital. But instead, she made the best of her circumstances. 2.5 years ago, she gave me the phone call that I had been dreading, because for decades, we always knew, is this her last birthday? Is this the last time we go to Fenway Park to see the Red Sox? So she said that she got the prognosis of 6 months to live. And I'll never forget the day I felt the phone in my hand. Part of me was angry, and then part of me was so determined that I was going to live every day intentionally. And by that, I mean saying yes to things that normally I might question and wait till it's perfect and just the right timing, and saying no to things that didn't fit, didn't feel right in my brain, my heart. There's all those kinds of signs we get, and we know when we want to say no, but sometimes we do it to please other people or because we're afraid we might look stupid. I said, I'm going to say yes, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to fully participate in life and not observe, even when it's uncomfortable. That's the hard part, because so many people sit on the sidelines in life and they're waiting for it to be comfortable to step in. Life is not a comfort-centric experience. Some of the best growth and some of the best happiness we find is at the end of that challenging, uncomfortable situation.
we sometimes are resistant to change. We're sometimes resistant to getting out of our comfort zone. But once we do, we realize how empowered we become and how fulfilled and energized become because we've availed ourselves of new opportunities that we would not have had
Mhm.
otherwise. And I think it's good for any of us to get out of our comfort zone. I mean, if anybody told me I'd be doing a podcast 2 years ago, I would have laughed at them. But now, if I took the plunge and this is something I enjoyed doing and I will continue to do until it no longer is of value to me, or I'm not getting any more value out of it, or I don't feel my guests or audience is getting any more value out of it. But I mean, who would have thunk?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's part of your authentic self. That was your calling. It was something that you had to say no to the naysayers and no to the people saying, well, because we all have those in our lives.
Uh,
And we have to also listen to that message and say, how much of it are we going to allow them to infiltrate? So you took that chance and now you're living authentically. What people end up doing when they don't follow and they don't take that risk is they look back and they say, oh, I wish I had. I wish I had. Well, that's another great thing about retirement. There's so many bonuses is that now you don't have as many obligations, the daily obligations. If financially you're pretty well set, you don't have as many of those stresses on you. You have the freedom. And it's funny, it's a paradox in retirement. So much of it is joy, fear, freedom, too much freedom, certainty, uncertainty, all of those things that we have to kind of learn to go with the flow. But one of them is the opportunity. We are not encumbered by so many things that we have when we're in active working environment. We can decide only work 5 hours a week, only travel while we work. Whatever we decide, we get to start making those choices. And I like to say we get to be who we want to be and we get to do what we want to do. But discovering who we want to be is the tough part for my clients.
yeah. Well, and who they want to be has been so tied up into their work and family identity and
Mhm.
as caretakers and as providers that I think it's quite easy if you don't consciously try to achieve a balance to lose yourself and to lose your identity in those roles that
Oh,
we play day to day. One of the things that you've talked about is retirement reinvention. And I know there's retirement readiness, there's retirement reinvention. Is there a difference in terms of what you do with retirement reinvention and retirement readiness, or do they kind of go hand in hand?
well, the retirement readiness is wonderful. That is a blessing if you find it and if I can talk to clients before they retire. So, retirement readiness is the preparing psychologically, besides logically and logistically for all those needs. So, if we have been blessed to have gotten to that point where we're ready for retirement, the reinvention is exciting. It can be just a renewal of things that you used to do. It can be discovering new places, things, people that you want to surround yourself with. It can be totally, when I say reinvention, I've had clients that have completely flipped and are pursuing things that deep down inside they always wanted to do, but their father said they should be a lawyer, or they became a mother, or they're back in the 70s, someone told you you could only be a nurse and a teacher if you were a woman. Well, I want to be a lumberjack, or whatever it is. Our identity, I often say, is like our clothing. We can morph and change with our transitions and our different stages in our lives. And to me, it can be annoying how excited I get when people go through transition. After they get through the pain of the growth experience and the discomfort, now it's opportunities, curiosity. When we reinvent ourselves, it's an open canvas. We can look at things that maybe we dared not to dream about. And I take my clients through all different what we call hot pen exercises where without thinking, I put on some background music and they just write down. I will prompt them with questions and they'll write down dreams, desires, letting go. Before we can move and reinvent, we have to let go. We got
Mhm.
to let go of a lot of things. The paradox of retirement is the fear of the unknown and the fear of the letting go. Because so many people are comfortable in their uncomfortableness too. It's because that's what they know.
And you're going to gravitate to what you know.
Mhm.
And it's habitual and in many ways unconscious is that we
Oh,
will
yes.
recreate those same scenarios that caused us pain, that caused us trauma, but we just keep revisiting it and revisiting it very unconsciously because it's so wired into our brains and our bodies.
Well, you think about, I have people that I've worked with and people in my life that when sometimes they forget that they're in the room with me
Mhm.
and they'll say out loud what they're thinking and they're so mean to themselves. Oh, you're so stupid. Why'd you do that? There are a lot of people that are not kind to themselves. And it's a habit, that negative self-image, the limiting beliefs. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. That's too hard. That's too scary. All of those things that we have to work on reframing. Let's look at it a different way. Let's start talking to ourselves in a different way. Let's do visualizations, affirmations, things that are empowering instead of negative, belittling, the things that suck at our consciousness and our soul and our well being. And it becomes such a habit, people don't even realize they're doing it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think positive beliefs and energize us in positive ways and contribute to positive behavior. If we're feeling positive, we're going to attract positive things in our lives. If we're feeling negative, we're going to attract those experiences that are going to mirror how we feel on the inside. And I've learned that over the years that certainly how we feel dictates what we attract into our lives,
Oh, yes.
and how we feel mentally dictates how we feel physically. You know, it's interesting when you were talking about the voices in our head that say, do this or you can't do that. One of the things that occurred to me is that those voices are probably of individuals who are previous authority figures in our life who are no longer physically present, but
Yeah.
those voices remain ever present. And in some way, their legacy, which is not their legacy in a good way,
Hmm.
goes on because those voices that we feed into can tell us that we are not capable of achieving the potential in any stage of our life, but particularly in retirement. And we have to kind of quiet those voices, ignore those voices, redirect those voices if we're going to reach our true potential. And I also see that as part of retirement reinvention is getting rid of that internal noise that's going to keep us down.
Well, and many of those voices, there's a couple of things I want to say and remind me to talk about Dr. Joe Dispenza. Oof, that's a whole nother thing. But those voices quite often are from our childhood.
Mhm.
Before the age of 7, before the prefrontal lobe is completely formed, and we don't have the ability to differentiate what someone is saying to the actual meaning and put it in context. That's why 7-year-olds and younger are living in fantasy so often. So when a child comes home and the father is working on a computer and the child wants to say, Daddy, look at this. And daddy's like, why can't you leave me alone? You're always bothering me, or what? The child sees it as, he doesn't love me. He doesn't value me.
Mhm.
An adult would say, ugh, he's having a tough time. I'll come back in 10 minutes. But they don't know how to. And those things stick with us. I've
Mhm.
worked with 55-year-old men that have had tears first from pain and then tears of joy when they figured that all out. And they're like, wow, my dad wasn't telling me I wasn't lovable. He was just saying this is a bad time. Or maybe he was going through a crisis at work. And now as an adult, I can look back and say he handled it the best way he could.
Yeah, and depending on what age they heard that message, may not have been capable of taking the abstract view of that, and
Now,
they just take a look at it as something that I did personally that's making my father or making my mother angry. So therefore, their behavior, their reaction is my fault.
yeah. And I am unworthy. There's something wrong with me. There's
Hmm.
so many things that, and what's wonderful is those same thoughts can be retrained and we can start sending a different message, and it's a habit. It's something that has to be worked on. This doesn't happen overnight. I tell people when they start working with me, depending on their situation, This is not going to be easy. When I interview someone and do a discovery call, they have to be open and ready to do some pretty
Yep.
deep work. And if they're not ready, it's not a good time. That's fine. I'm here when they are. But if they are ready, they have to be prepared. It's deep. It's
Mhm.
fulfilling. And at the end of it all, my gosh, the peace of mind. Some of my clients tell me, I never understood forgiveness from the heart. I was told to forgive because that makes you feel better, but never truly understood how to feel forgiveness. And, he was 65 years old, and the burden, the weights that were lifted off of him. So now he could start to fly and
Yep.
reinvent and enjoy the opportunities and dream, because all of that stuff was still so encumbering and keeping him down, that until we get rid of all of that. And it's not as easy as I actually, when I started working with retirees, I interviewed a lot of retirees. And then I also went on Amazon top 50 and found next to none that talked about deep psychological impact of retirement. They touched the surface. And I think
And
this is too important not to talk about.
well, particularly if we don't address the issues from our childhood or early adulthood or middle adulthood, that's going to get in the way of us leading a fulfilling retirement, because those negative messages are going to come out, prevent us from achieving our true dreams and fulfillment at that stage of life. So, what were you going to mention about Joe Dispenza? You said you wanted
Oh,
to
Joe
mention something.
Dispenza.
Joe
Yes.
Dispenza, yes.
Yes. When we talk about what the mind does to the body, now he's a scientist who has written several books. A couple of my favorites, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself is the first one to read. And it talks about when we reframe our thoughts and we start to visualize the goal achieved. It's kind of like The Secret and some of the others. But what he takes to a further step is when we truly believe and start to feel. Let's say I made a vision board and I put 5 or 6 things that I think in the next 5 years I would love to achieve. If I leave it at that, it's flat. It hasn't dealt with my emotional feelings about it. So instead, when I do that vision board, I'm going to now meditate and visualize the absolute. If it's a day in Venice, that's one of my favorite places to visit. I'm going to visualize from beginning to end the way I'm going to feel as I'm stepping onto the boat, as I'm walking in the sunshine, as whatever it is. And you keep doing this on a regular basis, and it becomes an exercise or a pattern of your thinking in your life, that you actually feel the dreams fulfilled. And
Mhm.
his research has shown that it actually has physical results in the human body. He did one, again, paraphrasing, research with a group of adults that were placed in an age-appropriate environment. They were senior citizens, so they had this senior citizen music and the senior citizen mundane food and all of the other things, and probably the conversations about their bowels and their bladders and whatever they wanted to complain about. The negative connotations. You and I don't connect with that because I saw your face, but there are a lot of people. I know them. They sit and they talk about bodily functions and how things don't work. And it's like, guys, yeah, that's part of what happens to our bodies. But let's look at what we are capable of. Anyway, so we took that one test group, and then the other test group was put in an environment from 30 years prior, when they had the jukebox playing, when they had the sports teams that they used to admire. The conversations were more uplifting and things about what they did when they were that age. And the physical changes, lengthening of joints, increased height. Now, they didn't grow taller, but their spine they weren't being beaten down by life. They had so much more energy and vibrancy just from their environment, but also from the thoughts that they were saying and thinking.
Mm.
And so science, this is the key to when I talk about this, is a lot of the stuff people say, oh, that's that metaphysical woo-woo. I want concrete science, facts. Well, this is some of that. And, I dare anybody that's listening to go start looking up some of this stuff. because there is science behind mindset and how it affects you physically, and how diseases can be accelerated or
Mhm.
dissipated by mindset. So it's not just woo-woo anymore.
No, that connection has been established for quite a while now, and we're beginning to increasingly appreciate the mind-body connection and see where its role is in empirical science.
But you'd be surprised how many people in the general population still are afraid of
Mhm.
talking about any of that until they see something that seems to be proof.
Yeah. Yeah. If I can't experience it with my five senses, it does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of things that science can't explain that are truly real.
Right.
And that allows us to behold the magic that's truly in the universe. And in
Mm-hmm.
retirement, I think if we can reinvent ourselves from retirement, we learn to appreciate the magic in the universe and realize that we are just so infinitesimally small in comparison to what the universe manifests. And if we
Yes.
can stand in awe of that and connect with that, it's also, from a spiritual standpoint, going to be a very fulfilling retirement. Well, we're getting close to our time, and I could talk to you probably for about another hour, but
Yeah, you just opened up a whole nother conversation about
yeah.
quantum theory. And believe me, I want you to come and speak to my group sometime, and we'll talk about some of that and the infinite possibilities and living in a state of curiosity.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you want me, you got me.
Good, good, good.
One of my last questions for you is if you're going to leave our listeners with one takeaway, what would that be?
Well, I think the biggest one, and we've discussed it, so I will reiterate it again because I find it too important, is that let's stop walking around waiting for the outside world to meet our expectations and provide us happiness. Let's find that inner happiness that is within us, that by living with intention and meaningful connections, that we can find our happiness now. It can be done, and you can find your true fulfillment and live in your true identity and purpose and authenticity now. Takes a little work, but let's stop waiting for the right moment. And I say every day, one of my many affirmations is, it's from Winnie the Pooh, and then I add a little extra, is today is my new favorite day, and I'm going to squeeze every drop of life out of it.
Yeah, I think there's an old Buddhist saying that I read actually in Tuesdays with Warriors. If I and I'm paraphrasing this, if there's a bird on your shoulder telling you that today was going to be your last day, how would you choose to live that day?
Mhm.
You know, would you live it intentionally? Would you live it with purpose? Would you live it with service? Would your qualities for that day be love and compassion and inclusivity and empathy? How would you choose to live that last day? And I think if we could learn to live each day as if that bird is on our shoulder,
Mhm.
I think our lives will become more fulfilling and the fear of death will go right out the window.
Oh, definitely. And I think you can make those connections that you have in your life meaningful.
Yep.
If they're truly that important to you, make sure that each person is aware of it and make that difference in the lives of the people that you touch every day. I wear a ring that's Gandhi's saying, be the change you wish to see in the world. Every person that I meet, I don't want them feeling worse about themselves after they've left me. I want them feeling better.
You know, and I think Gandhi also said, in the midst of darkness, light persists.
Mhm.
And that I think it's also important in retirement. We may see some of the darkness of some of the losses we've experienced, some of the things that we can't do, but let's look for the light that shines on the things that we can do.
And there's people like me and other people like you, Dave, that are here if you need guidance.
Absolutely. If individuals want to get in touch with you, contract for your services, find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that, Rosemary?
There's a couple of ways: LinkedIn, organization, company, whatever. I have had my LinkedIn account removed and I'm trying to reinstate it. There was an error and they actually closed my LinkedIn account. So, word to the wise, keep track of your email list. Okay.
Mhm.
And so LinkedIn is my name. And by the time this airs, it should be reinstated. Again, I'm hopeful. And the other is through my website, which will be, I'm sure, in the show notes. It's
Yep.
yourtransformationtrainer.com. And in there is my calendar link. I love to talk to people. If you've got ideas, suggestions, collaborations, I love working with other people that have the same type of clients. If you want me to come talk to your people, whatever you'd like. It's a message that's too important that we shouldn't be sharing it.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. Rosemary, thank you so much for sharing space with me on the Teaching Journeys podcast today. I had a blast, and we have to do this again soon.
Sounds wonderful. And Happy New Year. Happy New Day.
Happy New Year to you and your loved ones and family and everybody that is in your circle. And my wish is that for all of us to have joy and abundance, however we define abundance for 2025. And with that, that is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.